Hey, folks, Quill18 here, and I got to play Sid Meier's Civilization VII for 3 hours over at the Firaxis headquarters about a couple weeks before you see this video. I was not able to record my session, but I have been sent some B-roll from someone else playing the game over at Firaxis, and I'm very happy to be talking about this. I believe this might be the final video in this specific series of looking at the B-roll, although I do have some other things that I'm planning on doing some videos for, and there will be plenty of content, in theory, available between now and when Civ 7 actually releases, which is going to be in February. We are going to look now at the Crisis and Legacy path, and this is highly tied into the New Age mechanic. So, Civ 6 is divided into 3 ages now, and each one is a pretty significant and heavy gameplay mechanical thing. One thing you can almost think of it as is it's almost like each one of these sub-ages has its own kind of victory system, which we're going to talk about in a second when we look at the legacies. But first, we're going to deal with the crises. So as you move forward in the crisis, and you can see this little timeline over here, right? Age begins, and then various things will happen that is going to fill this age progression. And at some point, there's going to be a crisis, right? This is going to be the tipping point that is going to force the world to change from one kind of era to another, because things are just going to be getting worse. So just like we have the social policies that you slot in to build your government, there's also the crisis policies, and you have to select these when the slot becomes unlocked, and they're always bad. So clearly in this game, previously when the crisis originally started over here, they had one slot, and they slotted in inferior tactics, which gives, I suspect we're playing as Rome over here, which gives Rome -6 combat strength against independent powers, i.e. barbarians and maybe city-state kind of things. Makes them worse at fighting over there. Now they're going to have to choose something else that is also bad. Things are getting worse, and we have to go and transition from one age to another. This is an area where Civ 7 is going to be slightly less of a pure sandbox than previous versions of Civ. We have a little bit more of this sort of guided flow of the story. But in addition to the crises, which are bad and suck, and we all hate them, but we're going to have to go and just bear through it until we get to the next age, we then also have these legacy paths over here. So again, normally in Civ, at some point at the end of the game, you're going to follow down your particular victory path. Now, you may have planned it relatively early, but you're really just mostly pursuing it right at the end, right? Your scientific victory, we will go to space. Your kind of domination victory, where we're going to go and take over all the capitals, and so on and so forth. But in each age, you're going to get play around with some of this mechanic. Now, you're not making a hard decision. You're not locking into one thing or another. You can do whatever you want, whenever you want, and you can pursue multiple things at the same time. That's totally okay. But as you progress down these ages, you're going to have certain goals. Now, this is actually presented, and it doesn't really show this in the video anywhere, but the progression down these various paths, this is the end goal of it. So it's 10 codices here. Under culture, they're going to show this in a second. It's have 7 wonders, but there's actually the sort of like mini quests that lead you down sort of step by step and build it up, and guide you through those things. So it's not just build 7 wonders. It's well, research this thing. Now build a wonder. Okay, now do this thing. Or in the military, it's like, okay, have 3 warriors. Okay, now go and conquer 1 enemy settlement, and so on and so forth. And then as we progress down these paths, you can see we're going to get some little rewards. You can see here, if we progress down the science thing, we get these scientific legacy points that advance forward. We also get scientific attribute points. We looked at attributes in the previous videos. Those are the permanent level ups for your character that you're going to follow and continue down the game. And we get other like various soft bonuses or hard bonuses that advance with these various just progressions through the age, right? These legacy paths over here. And yeah, in practice, you'll probably trigger a few of these different ones, at least the first level. There's a good chance you'll get the first level of all 4 of them kind of sort of all the time, but you might hyper focus in one category versus another, to really try to min-max a particular benefit of some kind. But yeah, a lot of the starting ones are fairly easy to achieve, and why not bring those bonuses forward with you? So I think there's going to be emphasis on a lot of different playthroughs, especially, again, you can play the same empire, the same civilization, but experience it in a variety of different ways. Wow, that is really the end of the video. The ages are such a big deal that it feels weird that it's not touched on more in this B-roll. I'm hoping that the presentation that Firaxis is going to be putting out on this, theoretically today, these videos are coming out on August the 20th, which is also where there's going to be some news from Firaxis. But yeah, it's going to be substantial. Now, I don't think again, we've seen some of these mechanics in something like Millennia. We've seen some of these mechanics in something like Humankind. I think it's going to be feeling very different here in Civ 7. Some parts of it are going to be more significant. Some parts of it are going to be less significant and more freeform. I don't think this is going to be the end all and be all of the game. One thing to note is some of the buildings. I don't remember if I talked about this when we were talking about the city building stuff, but some buildings are listed as being ageless. So they will, once you build them, they always give you the same benefit throughout the rest of the game, like a granary. But some buildings are tied to an age, and when you go from one age to another, that building will become less potent. I think in the current build they were talking about it would keep the basic bonus from that building, but you would lose some of the boost to some of the improvements, right? Like, okay, Granary is not a good example of this because it's an ageless building, but as an example, the Granary gives you a flat amount of food just for building it, and also makes your farms be worth +1 food. Well, imagine a situation where if the Granary wasn't ageless, you would keep the flat food bonus, but you would lose the +1 food to farms kind of thing, because the building, it becomes kind of obsolete. So then you're replacing it with a new type of building. Again, that's a bad example because that's something that's meant to be ageless and is balanced to be ageless. So the buildings that do become obsolete through the ages will feel presumably quite different from that, but there's that kind of vibe. So as you go through the ages, you will be obsoleting certain ancient buildings that don't make sense anymore, and instead unlocking more modern buildings that do make sense in the modern world. Like, we don't have city walls in modern cities because they aren't good for defense. In fact, that kind of mechanic has always kind of existed in Civ, in that a lot of times in Civ, the city walls would give you a certain bonus, but then if gunpowder units would ignore those bonuses, right? That's something I can think of. Civ 4, for example, has exactly that kind of mechanic. They basically do nothing against gunpowder units because they don't make sense in that particular context. In Civ 6, in later ages, your walls give you tourism points because they're really there just as a cool sort of historical tourist attraction rather than anything of any true tactical value. So it makes sense that what the purpose of these buildings are will shift as you go through the ages, which is quite cool. But again, in the build that we played, we were only playing in the Antiquities Age. I did reach the end of the Antiquities Age. I got the whole pop-up of, oh, the Antiquities Age is finished, and then that was it. I basically got an end game screen at that point. So we have no idea at this point how the other ages will play through. I suspect there will be some video content that will give hints as to the other ages, and hopefully I'll get a copy of that, and we can put it up on this channel as well to show that, but I don't have it in my grubby little hands at this time, so we can't make any comment on that. Overall, my experience of playing Civ 7 at Firaxis for 3 hours was very good. I really, really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the city building. It felt good and meaningful and kind of cool and interesting. Some of the buildings and districts, I mean, there are adjacency bonuses. That is still a thing that exists for your urban buildings. So just like how you're placing districts in Civ 6, you're looking for those adjacency bonuses to make your campuses more meaningful by putting them next to mountains and things like that. Some of those elements still exist, but they feel like they're in a different form. I think visually the game looks really good, which, I mean, visuals aren't gameplay, but obviously they matter. They do matter, and they are important. I really felt like I enjoyed the diplomacy system. I really felt that my relationship with Rome was important and meaningful. I got a lot of benefits from it. It felt like there were a lot of buttons I could click early on to improve that. We did those cultural deals all the time, those market deals all the time, and then I allied with Rome, and then together we went and beat up Amani, which was good, and I was never really friends with Amani because she's very militaristic and wanted to come after me right away. I did deal with barbarian bullshit that was exactly what you'd kind of expect. At some point, barbarians come out of the fog of war. You're like, oh my God, I don't know if I was ready for this yet. I was so focused on trying to build a wonder, I forgot to build an army. So they were kind of scary, but I eventually fought them back. Eventually, I figured out how to use army commanders. And once I figured out army commanders, I thought, okay, this is cool, fun, very satisfying. I mean, it makes you feel a little bit like when you're playing with great generals in some of the versions of Civ, right? You keep them around to give boosts to your nearby troops. So there's that, but they're amplified. I think their movement abilities are going to be really good and really satisfying for moving things around the map. I'm not lamenting the loss of workers and builders. I'm hoping that the city building still feels satisfying, and it might be the sort of thing that we'll only know after a couple hundred hours of gameplay. But especially the Civ 6 builders, they mostly just gave me stress rather than feel enjoyable. So I'm not opposed to seeing them go. Although I have to say, I never had the same issue with, say, going back all the way back to like Civ 4 and Civ 5 with the worker mechanic. They didn't feel quite as stressy, but were they actually fun? Maybe they weren't. Maybe we've just assumed that workers are a thing that needed to exist, and maybe now that we've played Civ 7, maybe we'll never want to go back. It's like units that embark, right? The auto embarking units in Civ 5 and then Civ 6 as well. As soon as they were introduced, going back to something like Civ 4 and having to build transport ships, no, it's the worst. It sucks. I don't ever want to have to manually load a unit onto a boat ever again. I just want my units to auto embark because that is so much more enjoyable. And I can't imagine going back to anything like that. Maybe the builders will end up being the same thing. Who knows? Do expect a lot more Civ 7 content on the channel, and probably some Civ 6 and some Civ 5 and some Civ 4 as we revisit some things. And the nice thing about it is those games never go away. I still play Civ 4 despite the fact that 5 and 6 exist because it's different and I enjoy it. They are different games. Sometimes I want to play Civ 6. Sometimes I want to play Civ 4. I really do have to give Civ 5 some more love because I actually have way more hours in Civ 5 than Civ 6, and I haven't played it in ages, and I really have to revisit it because I think it deserves some playthrough. But you can guarantee there's going to be a lot of Civ 7 on the channel when it comes out. Thanks for watching, folks. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.